Because you can think about sort of reality, first of all, is different in different contexts. I mean, you have a physical reality, which is maybe based on the cells that contain you, except for the fact that even those cells that you think of as yourself are not necessarily all there is to you biologically. I mean, you can have a pheromone cloud, you can have an electric field, you can have some of these other things that are actually extending out beyond your own boundaries. Actually, I am going to want to talk about resonance. That was another thing that I forgot down there. And, you know, so that's one lens that you can look at reality at, and even that's a little fuzzy. You know, and then another reality is sort of what your experience tells you is true, and that's where you can start to get into a cultural reality, because if you talk to people from different cultures, it's not that they're mistaken necessarily in their belief that, you know, one thing might be true or another thing might be true. It's just you grow up in a culture, you get a whole system of beliefs which really literally influence how you see the world. And it's not pretend, it's real, you know. So people who grew up believing in particular kinds of things that other people might not believe in don't have a pretend experience. They have an experience to them which is as real as any other experience. You know, they really do talk to their ancestors. They really do talk to God. They may, you know, see fairies. It's not that, you know, all of a sudden it's all explainable. Which doesn't necessarily mean that those things are out there, but maybe they are and maybe they're not. There's this really interesting idea in a book called The Holographic Universe, which has all kinds of incredibly interesting ideas, but which is that to a certain degree people almost create these beings or these realities, these spirits, these fairies, these other things through their belief system. And it's almost that they do have a sort of a place in the universe that they might not have had through this idea of being thought about. So that's a kind of a hard idea to be able to say, okay, whatever reality you have is yours. You know, I think the next place where you see some of that is on a psychological level, where you know, somebody may be carrying a psychological idea with them, which in some ways isn't true. You know, maybe you believe that your mother, you know, never paid attention to you. And maybe if you were actually to look at the situation, you'd be able to see how often your mother did in fact pay attention to you. But if you're carrying around a psychological reality that your mother never paid attention to you, it doesn't necessarily matter what actually happened. That is your reality, and it affects you as if it were true. And so that's, you know, one of the places that it can get kind of fuzzy. Then you can start to get into some even weirder metaphysical stuff about, you know, how your interactions with other people affect your reality, how the way that you're viewed by others influences how you see yourself and how you see the rest of the world. You know, I mean, people will sometimes talk about, oh, I didn't get a good vibe from that person. And, you know, that's a situation where there's this percept that there's actually some kind of vibrating something or other, you know, which is either connecting with you well or not connecting with you well. And a lot of times when you look at people's language, you'll see that they use these terms about things that don't necessarily have what we consider a physical reality. When it comes to vibrations, I actually think that they probably are talking about a form of a physical reality. But, you know, that can be this whole other very rich world in which what you think is true isn't necessarily true, but it kind of is. Yeah. So I think those are, you know, a few examples of that. Yeah. That you know, and I've also been getting into some of these other ideas about that on the most basic level, and I think I mentioned this before, that what is there is a basis of a whole series of interactions about other things that are there to one degree or another. You know, I think you can see this on a biological level with gene expression, and I, you know, as I say, I suspect that they're going to see it on the most basic physical level. You know, that there is sort of this process by which things come to be, which is very dynamic. I think people, you know, sometimes have this idea of God as a sort of a poof, and there it is. And, you know, whatever my own ideas of God are, I mean, certainly as I've been thinking about the nature of reality, it makes a great deal of sense to me to think about it as something emergent and flowing and interacting and dynamic. And, you know, because I love dynamic systems, I think it's kind of it adds to a different way of thinking about how things can change. And that's actually one of the things I've been thinking about sort of my whole life, is how do things actually change and get from one situation to another. So this is one aspect of that.
Nice.